Elena Voss had learned, a long time ago, that she was the kind of person people looked past. Not through, exactly. Past. As if her presence in a room was a small inconvenience that everyone silently agreed to overlook. In the Voss household, there was only ever one daughter who mattered, and that was Serafina. Serafina was tall, golden-haired, and blessed with the rare beta strength that made pack elders whisper her name with respect. Elena was an omega, quiet and small, the kind of wolf who was expected to serve rather than lead. Their parents had stopped pretending otherwise by the time Elena was 10 years old. At family dinners, Serafina sat closest to their father. At pack meetings, Serafina was introduced first, sometimes only. Elena was the one who refilled the water glasses and stood near the door, ready to be useful the moment someone remembered she existed. She had told herself, over the years, that it did not hurt anymore. That she had grown used to the shape of her own invisibility, the way a person grows used to a small ache in an old injury. But some days the ache still caught her off guard, sharp and unexpected, like now, as she stood in a narrow dressing room off the great hall of Blackthorn Castle, pinning the final layer of her sister's wedding gown into place. "You're pulling too tight," Serafina snapped, glancing at herself in the mirror rather than at Elena. "Be careful. This is the most important day of my life, of our family's life." "I'm sorry," Elena murmured, easing the pin free and trying again, her fingers steady despite the tightness in her chest. Today, Serafina Voss would marry Alpha King Damien Ashford, ruler of Blackthorn Valley, in a ceremony that would bind two powerful pack territories together for the first time in a generation. Elena had heard the whispers for months. It was the match of the century, the elders said. A union built on strategy, strength, and old family alliances. No one had asked whether the king's wolf agreed. No one ever did. Arranged matings were common among ruling packs, sealed through ceremony rather than the mate bond itself. It was simply how things were done at this level of power. Elena finished the last pin and stepped back. "You look beautiful," she said, and meant it. Serafina finally looked at her. Just for a moment, something almost soft crossing her face. "Thank you for helping me get ready. I know this isn't easy for you." It was the kindest thing her sister had said to her in years, and Elena held on to it as she followed Serafina out toward the great hall, carrying the long train of her wedding gown like she had carried so many other things in her sister's shadow. The hall was filled beyond capacity. Nobles from every corner of the valley had gathered beneath the high stone arches, their formal robes a sea of color and rank. Elena kept her eyes down as she walked the aisle behind her sister, aware of how small she must look, how easily forgettable, next to Serafina's radiant confidence. At the altar stood Alpha King Damien Ashford. Elena had seen him only from a distance before, at pack gatherings where she was never important enough to be introduced. Up close, he was harder to ignore. He stood tall and composed, dressed in deep formal black, his expression carefully unreadable. He was, by every account, a fair ruler, firm but not cruel, dedicated to his people in a way that had earned him quiet respect even from packs outside his own territory. He did not smile as Serafina approached him. Elena wondered if that was simply his nature, or if some part of him understood that this marriage, like hers, had been arranged rather than chosen. The priestess began the ceremony, her voice carrying easily through the silent hall. She spoke the old words, the ones that had bound Alpha Kings and Queens for 1,000 years, words about duty and unity, and the strength of two territories joined as one. Elena stood off to the side, holding the edge of Serafina's train, doing her best to disappear into the background the way she always had. Then the priestess called for the final part of the rite, the part that could not be arranged, bought, or forced. The wolf's acceptance. In the old tradition, before a king's marriage could be considered truly sealed before the pack, his wolf had to release a mating call over the bride, a sound that confirmed the union in the eyes of the gathered wolves. For centuries, it had been treated as ceremony more than truth, a formality that powerful alphas were trained to perform through sheer discipline, regardless of whether the bond was real. Damien closed his eyes, drawing on the training that had prepared him for this moment his entire life. Elena watched him take a slow breath, watched the muscles of his jaw tighten with concentration. and then something went wrong. A low growl rippled through the hall, low and involuntary, rising from Damien's throat before he could stop it. His composed expression cracked, just slightly, surprise flashing behind his eyes. He tried again, jaw clenched, but the growl only deepened, and this time his shoulders shook, as though something inside him were fighting against his own will. Whispers spread through the crowd like wind through dry grass. Something is wrong. His wolf is resisting. That has never happened before. Serafina's smile faltered as she turned to look at him. Damien? He did not answer. His eyes had changed, the gold of his wolf bleeding into his gaze, and for a moment, it looked as though he were fighting a battle no one else in the hall could see. His hands curled into fists at his sides. His breath came fast and uneven. Then, without warning, he turned away from Serafina completely. The crowd gasped as the king's wolf surged forward, faster than anyone expected, breaking free of the control that had bound it through a lifetime of discipline. It moved past the altar, past the priestess, past Serafina's outstretched hand, and stopped directly in front of Elena. For one long, terrible moment, no one in the hall made a sound. The great wolf lowered its head and pressed it gently against Elena's trembling hands. Then it lifted its muzzle to the ceiling and released a call unlike anything Elena had ever heard. Deep, resonant, filled with a longing that seemed to shake the very stones of the hall. It was the mating call, unmistakable, undeniable. And it was for her. Elena stumbled back, letting go of the train she still held, her mind refusing to accept what her body already understood. This could not be happening, not to her, not the invisible daughter, the one who had spent her whole life being overlooked. No, she whispered. This is a mistake. But wolves did not make mistakes about mates. Everyone in that hall knew it, even as they struggled to believe it. Serafina's face had gone white, then red with fury. What is this? She demanded, her voice cracking through the stunned silence. What did you do to him? I didn't do anything, Elena said, backing away. I don't understand. You planned this, Serafina snapped, striding toward her sister with her wedding gown billowing behind her like a storm cloud. You've always wanted what was mine. Even now, even here. Enough. Damien's voice cut through the hall, low but absolute, carrying the unmistakable weight of command. His wolf had receded, leaving his human eyes clear again, though something in his expression had changed permanently. He was staring at Elena as though seeing her, truly seeing her, for the very first time. The hall fell silent, waiting. I did not plan this, Damien said, his gaze not leaving Elena's face. I did not know until this moment. But the bond has spoken, and I will not dishonor it by pretending otherwise. Elena's family, gathered near the front of the hall, looked on in horrified silence. Her father's face had gone rigid with humiliation. Her mother would not meet her eyes at all. She is nothing, Serafina spat, tears now streaking down her carefully painted face. She is an omega no one has ever wanted. This is an insult. She is my mate, Damien said simply, and the words rang through the stone hall like a bell. The bond does not lie, and I will not build a marriage on top of a truth I have just been shown. Elena's chest tightened painfully. Part of her wanted to run, to escape the hundreds of eyes now fixed on her, the weight of expectation and disbelief pressing down like a physical thing. She had spent her whole life avoiding attention, and now the entire kingdom was staring at her, as though she had somehow stolen something that was never meant to be hers. I don't want this, she said quietly, though her voice shook. I never asked for this. Damien stepped down from the altar and crossed the distance between them, ignoring the murmurs that followed his every step. He stopped in front of her, closer than any stranger had ever stood, and for a moment, Elena forgot to be afraid. I know you didn't ask for it, he said, his voice gentler now, meant only for her. Neither did I, but I have spent my whole life doing what duty required of me, and my wolf has never once fought me the way it fought me today. That has to mean something. Your wolf doesn't know me, Elena whispered. No one does. Ask anyone in this hall. They'll tell you I'm no one important. Then they are wrong, Damien said, and I intend to find out exactly who you are. Her father stepped forward then, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "This is unacceptable. The alliance was built around Serafina. This girl has nothing to offer this kingdom. No strength, no standing, nothing." Damien's expression hardened as he turned to face the older man. "With respect, the alliance you speak of was built around convenience, not truth. I understand your daughter is embarrassed, and I regret the pain this has caused her. But I will not stand before my pack and lie about what has just happened here. The bond is real. I felt it as surely as I feel my own heartbeat." Serafina, shaking with anger and grief, turned on her heel and fled the hall, her golden hair streaming behind her, the wedding gown Elena had so carefully pinned, now dragging carelessly across the stone floor. Her parents hurried after her, throwing one last look of disappointment toward Elena before disappearing through the great doors. The hall remained frozen in stunned silence. Elena stood alone at the center of it, the weight of 1,000 curious, doubtful eyes pressing in around her, and for the first time in years, she did not shrink away. She lifted her chin, just slightly, and looked at the man beside her, the Alpha King whose wolf had chosen her over everyone else in the kingdom. "I'm frightened," she admitted quietly, only for him to hear. "I know," Damien said. "So am I. But we don't have to understand everything today. We only have to be honest about what is true." In the days that followed, the kingdom buzzed with talk of the ceremony that had gone so unexpectedly wrong. Some called it scandal, others called it fate. Elena, who had spent her entire life avoiding notice, found herself the subject of conversation in every corner of Blackthorn Valley, and it terrified her more than she wanted to admit. But Damien did not treat her the way her family had. He sought her out in the quiet hours, asking about her days, her thoughts, the small things no one had ever cared to ask before. He was patient with her uncertainty, never pushing, never demanding that she simply accept what fate had handed them both. Slowly, carefully, Elena began to let herself believe that this strange turn in her life might not be a mistake after all. Her sister did not accept the change so easily. Humiliated before the entire kingdom, Serafina withdrew from public life, her pride wounded deeper than anyone had expected. Rumors began to circulate that she had reached out to rival pack leaders, seeking allies who might help her reclaim what she believed had been stolen from her. Elena heard the whispers and felt the old fear rising in her chest, the fear that she would once again be blamed, once again cast as the villain in someone else's story. But this time, she was not alone. When the truth of Serafina's scheming eventually came to light, exposed before the pack elders through careful and patient investigation, it was not Elena who stood accused. It was her sister's own bitterness that had led her astray, and the pack, watching closely, saw clearly who among the sisters had chosen honesty and who had chosen resentment. Elena, once dismissed as the forgotten Omega, stood beside her mate as the kingdom watched her prove, quietly and steadily, that she was far more than anyone had ever believed. She was not loud or commanding in the way Serafina had always been, but she was honest and steady and kind in a way that slowly began to earn the trust of the people around her. Months later, as the pack gathered once more beneath the high stone arches of Blackthorn Castle, this time for a true and willing ceremony, Elena stood at the altar beside Damien, no longer holding someone else's train, no longer standing quietly at the edge of the room waiting to be noticed. When the priestess called for the wolf's acceptance, there was no hesitation, no struggle. Damien's wolf lifted its call freely and joyfully, and this time, the entire hall rose in celebration rather than shocked silence. Elena Voss, once the girl no one remembered, had finally found the place she was always meant to hold, not because fate had forced it upon her, but because, in the end, she had chosen to believe she deserved it. And for the first time in her life, she let herself be seen.